Human, are you single? The words hit me like ice water. I didn't even look up from the diagnostic panel I was fixing. Just another Tuesday on Stellan 9, the armpit of the outer rim where apparently even the aliens had given up on social boundaries. My brother thinks you'd be perfect. Now that made me pause. I set down my tools and finally looked at her. She couldn't have been more than 4 feet tall, this little alien girl standing in my cramped repair bay. Her skin had this pale blue shimmer like moonlight on water, and her eyes were way too old for whatever age she was supposed to be. Kid, I'm trying to work here. I'm not a kid. Her voice was steady, unsettlingly calm. I'm Mel, and you're Jace Reed, former combat medic, current maintenance technician, currently single, and emotionally unavailable. I blinked. How do you... Station records are public. Your psychological profile, however, I had to pay for. Great, just fantastic. I turned back to my panel, hoping she'd take the hint. Look, Mile, I'm flattered, but I'm not really the dating type anymore. Neither is my brother. Something in her tone made me stop again. There was weight there, like she was carrying something heavier than her tiny frame should allow. Then why are you here? She stepped closer, and I caught a whiff of something like cinnamon and starlight. Because broken things sometimes fit together better than whole ones. I laughed, but it came out harsh. Your brother collect damaged goods or something. No. Mael's expression didn't change. We just recognize our own. That shut me up real quick. I stared at this little alien girl who couldn't be older than 12 in human years, standing in my workshop like she owned the place, talking about brokenness, like it was a currency she traded in. What's wrong with your brother? Same thing that's wrong with you. She tilted her head, studying me like I was a puzzle she was solving. He used to heal people. Now he can't even heal himself. My hands went still on the diagnostic panel. Combat medics, we had a saying you can patch up everyone except the person in the mirror. This kid, this Mael, she'd just put her finger right on the wound I'd been ignoring for 3 years. How old are you, really? Old enough to know that you sleep 4 hours a night, drink synthetic coffee instead of eating breakfast, and haven't spoken to another human being for more than 5 minutes in the past 6 months. I set my tools down completely now. Are you some kind of therapist? I'm someone who watches, and I've been watching you, Jace Reeves. She moved to the small viewport in my workshop, looking out at the stars. My brother doesn't talk anymore. The war took his voice along with everything else, but he still dreams about saving people. War does that to healers. Yes. She turned back to me, and for a second, I saw something ancient flicker behind those young eyes. It breaks the very thing that made us who we are. The silent stretch between us, filled with the hum of the station's life support and the distant sound of ships docking. I should have told her to leave, should have gone back to my repair work and pretended this conversation never happened. Instead, I heard myself asking, "What's his name, Mikhail?" The way she said it was like a prayer. He's been alone for 2 years, ever since I convinced him to leave the medical corps. And you think I'd be good for him? Mael smiled for the first time since she'd walked in, and it transformed her entire face. I think you'd understand him, and maybe if you're very lucky, he'd understand you too. She was already heading for the door when she paused and looked back. He'll be in the observation deck at 2200 hours, level 7, section C. He goes there every night to watch the stars. I didn't say I'd meet him. You didn't say you wouldn't. And with that, she was gone, leaving me alone with my broken diagnostic panel and the sudden terrifying possibility that maybe, just maybe, I was tired of being alone with my ghosts. 2200 hours came and went. I stayed in my workshop telling myself I had better things to do than chase after some alien girl's matchmaking fantasy. The plasma coupling on base 7 needed recalibrating, and the atmospheric recyclers were making that grinding noise again. But Mael had other plans. She showed up the next morning at 0630, right when I was nursing my first cup of synthetic coffee and pretending yesterday never happened. You didn't come. I didn't look up from my maintenance logs. Nope. He waited for 2 hours. That made my hand pause over the data pad. I never said I would. You didn't say you wouldn't. She climbed onto the storage crate across from my workbench, settling in like she planned to stay a while. Kale doesn't wait for anyone, ever. You must have made quite an impression. Through a conversation that never happened. Through a conversation I told him about. Mael swung her legs, those two old eyes fixed on me. I described you very carefully. Your hands, how gentle they are with broken things. The way you hold yourself when you think no one's watching. How you never sleep through the night. I set down my coffee, harder than necessary. You've been spying on me. I've been observing. There's a difference. She leaned forward, suddenly intense. Do you know what Tasari do when they're interested in someone? Enlighten me. They watch for months, sometimes years. They learn everything about a person before they ever speak to them. It's not stalking, it's reverence. Sounds like stalking to me. Mael shrugged. Your species rushes into things and then wonders why they break apart. We take time to understand what we're asking for. I went back to my logs, but I could feel her stare boring into me. Stellan 9 wasn't exactly a social hub. Most of the permanent residents were here because they didn't want to be found. Outcasts, exiles, people running from something. The station attracted broken things like a magnet, and apparently that included me. Why me, I asked finally. There are other humans on the station. None like you. What's that supposed to mean? It means Kyle doesn't need someone who's whole. He needs someone who understands what it's like to have your purpose ripped away from you. Her voice got softer. Someone who knows what it feels like to fail the one person who mattered most. My hands went still. She couldn't know about Rachel. No one on this station knew about Rachel. Please just meet him once. Mael's tone shifted, becoming almost pleading. You don't have to marry him. You don't have to like him. Just talk to him. 5 minutes. And then you'll leave me alone. If that's what you want. I studied her face, looking for the lie, but those ancient eyes held nothing but sincerity, and maybe, just maybe, a flicker of desperation. Where is he now? Medical Bay, level 4. Of course he was. What's he doing there? Volunteering. He can't practice anymore, but he still helps however he can. Miles slid off the crate. He's very tall, taller than you, and he has scars along his throat, so don't stare. I'm not going to stare. Everyone stares. That's why he doesn't go out much. I found myself standing up, though I couldn't remember deciding to. This is insane. Most good things are. The medical bay on level 4 was exactly where I expected it to be, and nothing like I expected it to look. Clean, efficient, humming with the kind of quiet competence that made my chest tight with memory. I almost turned Hui around 3 times on the way there. But then I saw him. Kale was massive, easily 6.5 feet tall, with the kind of broad shoulders that spoke of heavy labor or heavy combat. His skin was the same pale blue as Mael's, but darker, like twilight instead of moonlight. He was restocking supply cabinets with the methodical precision of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. And Michelle was right about the scars. They ran along the left side of his throat in jagged lines, like someone had tried to carve his voice box out with a rusty blade. He noticed me watching and went perfectly still. Our eyes met across the bay, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in 3 years. Recognition. Not the kind where you know someone's face. The kind where you see yourself reflected in another person's damage. Kale straightened, slowly setting down the medical supplies. He moved with the careful grace of someone who'd learned to make himself smaller than he actually was. When he raised one hand in what might have been a greeting, I could see more scars running up his forearms. I should have said something, should have introduced myself, made some kind of normal human conversation. Instead, I just stood there like an idiot, staring at this broken alien who looked at me like he'd been waiting his whole life for someone to walk through that door. You came. The voice was barely a whisper, rough and painful sounding like every word cost him something. But there was wonder in it, pure, unguarded wonder. And that's when I realized I was absolutely, completely screwed. Because Mael had been right about one thing. Broken things did fit together better than whole ones. And I just found my missing piece. Mael thinks you're kind. Kale's voice was like sandpaper on metal, each word carefully measured. He gestured toward a chair beside the supply station, but didn't sit himself. Just stood there, hands clasped behind his back, like he was reporting for duty. That means more than you think. I lowered myself into the chair, suddenly aware of how loud my breathing sounded in the quiet medical bay. She's got an interesting way of showing appreciation. Something that might have been a smile flickered across his face. He reached for a data pad on the counter, fingers moving with surprising speed across the surface. When he turned it toward me, neat text filled the screen. She told me you fix things that others have given up on. I stared at the words. She talks about me a lot, doesn't she? More typing. Every day for 3 weeks. 3 weeks? I looked up sharply. She's been planning this for 3 weeks. Kyle nodded, then hesitated before adding more text. Tesori courtship customs require extensive observation periods. Mael takes them very seriously. Courtship customs. My voice cracked slightly. I thought this was just a conversation. He set the data pad down and did something I didn't expect. He laughed, silent shoulders shaking, head tilted back, kind of laughter that transformed his entire face. When he looked at me again, his eyes were bright with genuine amusement. You really didn't know, did you? I felt heat creep up my neck. Know what? Back to the data pad. Mael has been conducting formal pre-bonding research on your behavioral patterns, emotional stability, and compatibility metrics. She's been what? In human terms, I believe you would call it vetting you as a potential boyfriend. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. KL watched my face carefully, and I had the distinct impression he was cataloging my reaction for future reference. This is insane, I muttered. Most relationships are. He typed quickly, then paused before showing me the screen. Would you like me to explain Tesori bonding customs, or would you prefer to pretend this is just two people having coffee? I looked around the medical bay, noting the surgical instruments arranged with military precision, the diagnostic equipment humming softly in standby mode. We don't have coffee. I could replicate some. That's not the point. Kale tilted his head, waiting. There was something almost predatory about his stillness, like a hunter who knew exactly how to wait for his prey to make the next move. Explain the customs, I heard myself say. He picked up the data pad again, but this time his typing was slower, more deliberate. Physical contact is forbidden until formal intent is declared. Observation periods can last months or years. The potential mate must demonstrate compatibility across 7 different metrics before bonding can be considered. And what kind of metrics? Emotional resilience, protective instincts, ability to provide care during illness or injury, compatibility of life goals, sexual compatibility. He paused, glancing up at me. Willingness to sacrifice for the partner's well-being. And finally, the ability to carry or father healthy offspring. My mouth went dry. Offspring? Tesori mate for life. Children are the natural result of successful bonding. I stood up abruptly, pacing to the viewport on the far wall. The stars outside looked cold and distant, nothing like the warm lights of home. This is moving way too fast. When I turned back, Kyle was typing again. He showed me the screen without meeting my eyes. I told myself this was a mistake. Humans don't plan relationships like we do. You prefer spontaneity, emotional decisions, trial and error. And what did she say? She said that's why most human relationships fail. I couldn't argue with that logic. My track record spoke for itself. But there was something else bothering me, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. What happened to your voice? Kale went very still. The data pad remained blank for a long moment, and I thought maybe I'd crossed a line. Then slowly he began typing. I was a field medic during the Proxima conflict. We were treating casualties behind enemy lines when our position was overrun. He paused, fingers hovering over the screen. A human soldier was dying. Arterial rupture, massive blood loss. I was trying to intubate him when the bombardment started. Shrapnel caught my throat. Another pause. I finished the procedure anyway. The weight of those words settled between us like a physical thing. I found myself stepping closer, drawn by something I couldn't name. Did he live? Yes. And you? Kale touched his throat briefly, then returned to the data pad. Obviously. But you can't practice medicine anymore. Vocal commands are essential for surgical procedures. Hand signals don't work when you're elbow deep in someone's chest cavity. I watched him type, noting the economical movements, the way he held his massive frame so carefully controlled. So what do you do now? I volunteer here. Restock supplies, maintain equipment, assist with non-critical procedures. He hesitated. I fixed things too in my own way. Something clicked into place. Mael said, you understand what it's like to have your purpose ripped away. He nodded, not looking up from the datapad. What was yours? Same as yours, I think. When he showed me the screen, his text was barely 2 words. Saving people. And there it was. The thing I'd been running from for 3 years reflected back at me in the dark eyes of an alien who'd lost everything trying to save a human life. We stood there in the quiet medical bay, 2 broken healers who'd forgotten how to heal themselves. And for the first time since Rachel died, I felt something other than emptiness. I felt understood. Mael really thinks this could work, I asked quietly. Kyle's fingers moved across the datapad with something that looked almost like hope. She thinks we could save each other. 3 days later, I found myself doing something I hadn't done in years. I was looking forward to seeing someone. Kale and I had settled into an odd routine. I'd stop by the medical bay during my lunch break, and we'd sit together in comfortable silence, while he organized supplies and I pretended to read technical manuals. Sometimes we'd exchange a few words, him typing on his datapad, me responding out loud. It wasn't much, but it was more human connection than I'd had since arriving on Stellan 9, which is why I was completely unprepared for what I heard when I approached the medical bay that afternoon. Singing, not Kael's ruined whisper, but something else entirely, a voice like silver bells and starlight weaving through a melody that seemed to pull at something deep in my chest. I stopped just outside the entrance, not wanting to interrupt. The song was hauntingly beautiful, full of notes that seemed to bend and flow like water. But there was sadness in it too, a grief so profound it made my throat tight just listening to it. I recognized the voice. Mael. But more than that, I recognized the melody. The realization hit me like a physical blow. 3 years ago, during the evacuation of Kepler Station, I treated a Tassari woman who'd been caught in the bombing. She was dying, massive internal injuries, nothing I could do except make her comfortable. And in her final moments, she'd hummed this exact melody. I'd never forgotten it. How could it was the last sound she'd made before the light went out of her eyes. The singing stopped abruptly. I heard quick footsteps and muffled voices from inside the bay. When I finally entered, Mael was nowhere to be seen, and Kyle was standing frozen by the supply cabinet, his face pale. Was that? I started, then stopped. My voice sounded strange, hoarse. Kyle turned to look at me, and something in my expression must have given me away. His eyes went wide, and he reached for his datapad with shaking hands. You know that song? It wasn't a question. I nodded slowly, not trusting my voice. Where? He typed frantically. Where did you hear it? Kepler Station. 3 years ago, a Tassari woman, she was... I swallowed hard. She was dying. She hummed it right before... I couldn't finish the sentence, but I didn't need to. Kale's face had gone completely white, and the datapad slipped from his fingers, clattering to the floor. For a long moment, we just stared at each other across the medical bay. Then from behind a storage unit, I heard a soft sob. Mael emerged slowly, her young face streaked with tears. She looked impossibly small and fragile, nothing like the confident little matchmaker who'd been orchestrating our meetings. Her name was Liralee, Mael whispered. She was our mother. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I sank into the nearest chair, my mind reeling. Oh God, I'm so sorry. I tried everything, but the injuries were too severe, and we didn't have the right equipment, and... You were there. Mael's voice was barely audible. You were with her when she died. I nodded, tears burning my eyes. She wasn't alone. I promise you, she wasn't alone. Kyle had retrieved his datapad and was typing with desperate urgency. When he showed me the screen, his text was shaky letters jumbled together. What did she say? Did she say anything? She asked me to tell her children that she loved them, that she was proud of them, that they should... I paused, trying to remember her exact words. That they should find someone who would keep her song alive. Mael's sob echoed through the bay like a breaking heart. She ran to Kale, who dropped to one knee and gathered her into his arms, his own tears falling silently onto her hair. And suddenly everything made sense. This wasn't just about matchmaking or Tassari customs or broken healers finding each other. This was about a little girl who'd lost her mother and was desperately trying to fulfill a dying wish. This was about keeping a promise to someone who died in the arms of a stranger 3 years ago. She made me promise, I said quietly, your mother. She made me promise that if I ever met her children, I would tell them how much she loved them. Kale looked up at me over Mayu's head, his dark eyes swimming with grief and something else, something that looked almost like hope. The song he typed one-handed while still holding his sister. She taught it to us when we were children. It's about finding your way home, even when you're lost in the dark. Mayal pulled back from her brother, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. I've been singing it every night since she died. But it's not the same when you sing it alone. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken understanding. I thought about Rachel, about all the promises I'd made to dying patients that I'd never been able to keep, about the weight of carrying other people's final words and having nowhere to deliver them. Is that why, I asked Mayal, is that why you really wanted us to meet? Not just because you thought we'd be good together, but because you were the last person to hear her song, Mayal finished. And I thought maybe if Kale had someone who understood what that meant, someone who knew how precious those final moments were. She didn't finish, but she didn't need to. I understood now. This wasn't about romance or healing or any of the things I'd been telling myself. This was about legacy, about making sure that a mother's love didn't die with her, that her final wish for her children's happiness didn't disappear into the void. I looked at Kale, who was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Hope and fear and desperate longing all mixed together. She also said, I continued softly, that Tasari believes songs have power, that the right person can carry a melody across time and space, keeping it alive long after the singer is gone. Michael's eyes widened. She told you about the songkeeper tradition. Is that what this is? You're looking for someone to be your mother's songkeeper? I'm looking for someone who already is, Mael said simply. You've been carrying her song for 3 years, Jace. Every time you remember her, every time you think about that moment, you're keeping it live. And in that instant, sitting in a medical bay on the edge of nowhere, surrounded by the ghosts of the people I couldn't save, I finally understood what Mael had been trying to tell me all along. Sometimes broken things didn't just fit together. Sometimes they made each other whole again. After that day in the medical bay, everything changed. Not in the way I expected, not in the gentle, gradual way that healthy relationships are supposed to develop. Instead, it was like someone had taken a sledgehammer to the careful walls I'd built around myself, and now everything was exposed and raw and terrifying. Kale started leaving me messages. Not on the data pad during our conversations, but actual written notes slipped under my workshop door, tucked into my maintenance requests, hidden in places where only I would find them. At first, they were simple things. Observations about my work, questions about human customs, small jokes that made me smile despite myself. But then they got deeper. Do you ever wonder if the people we couldn't save would forgive us for surviving? Mael sleeps better when she knows you're coming to visit. I think it's because you prove that good people still exist. I dream about my voice sometimes. In the dreams, I'm singing with our mother again. Each note was like a tiny knife cutting through the numbness I'd wrapped around myself for 3 years. And the worst part was, I wanted more. I found myself checking my workshop obsessively, looking for those folded pieces of paper that contained pieces of KL's soul. Which is why when I found the letter that changed everything, I almost didn't read it. It was longer than the others, multiple pages folded together and sealed with something that looked like wax. My hands shook as I opened it, and I had to read it 3 times before the words really sank in. Jace, I need to tell you something that Mael doesn't know, something I've never told anyone. When the shrapnel hit my throat, I wasn't trying to save that human soldier because it was my duty. I was trying to save him because I thought if I could prove that human lives mattered to me, maybe one day a human would think my life mattered too. I've been alone since I was 17. Not just single, but alone in a way that goes deeper than physical proximity. Tasari form bonds that last lifetimes, but I never learned how. My parents died when I was young, and I was raised by military instructors who valued efficiency over emotional connection. I don't know how to love someone. I don't know how to be loved. But I know what it feels like to want something so desperately that you'd rather die trying than live without it. I don't expect love from you. I don't expect promises or declarations or any of the things that normal people share. I only want to feel human again, to remember what it's like to matter to someone other than my sister. You carry my mother's song, and that makes you sacred to my people. But more than that, you see me as something other than a broken thing that used to be useful. When you look at me, I don't see pity or fear or disgust. I see recognition. I think that's what love is for people like us. Recognition. The ability to look at someone else's damage and see it as beautiful instead of shameful. If you can't give me that, I understand, but I had to ask, because Mael is right about one thing. We do fit together better than whole people do. I'll be in the observation deck tonight at 2200 hours, the same place Mael told you to find me that first night. If you come, we'll figure out what this is together. If you don't, I'll know I was wrong about the recognition, and I'll stop hoping for things I can't have. Either way, thank you for making me feel human again, even if it was only for a little while. Kale, I read the letter 4 more times each pass, making my chest tighter and my breathing more shallow. By the time I finished, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the pages. This was it. This was the moment I'd been running from for 3 years. Someone was asking me to matter to them, to be important enough to risk their heart on. And all I could think about was Rachel lying in that hospital bed telling me she loved me right before the monitors went flat. I couldn't do this. I couldn't be responsible for another person's happiness, couldn't be the thing someone else needed to feel whole. Because what happened when I inevitably failed them? What happened when my damage proved too much for their healing? I was halfway to the observation deck before I realized I'd started walking. But instead of going up to level 7, I found myself heading down toward the docking bays and the transport schedules and the way off this station. The next transport to Kepler Station left in 6 hours. I could be gone before Kyle realized I wasn't coming, for I had to see the disappointment in his eyes when he figured out I was exactly what everyone else had always known me to be, a coward who ran when things got real. I was scanning departure times when I heard footsteps behind me. He's been waiting for 2 hours. I didn't turn around. I knew it was Mael, and I knew what I'd see if I looked at her. That same ancient disappointment I'd seen in the eyes of every patient I'd lost, every person I'd failed. I'm not good for him, I said quietly. That's not your decision to make. Yes, it is. I finally turned to face her, and her expression was even worse than I'd expected. Not angry, just tired, like she'd hoped for something better and wasn't really surprised to be let down. I hurt people, Mael. Everyone I care about ends up getting hurt. So you're going to hurt him first before he gets the chance to hurt you. I'm going to save him the trouble of finding out what kind of person I really am. Mael was quiet for a long moment, studying my face with those 2 old eyes. When she finally spoke, her voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. You know what you are, Jace. You're just like everyone else. The words hit harder than any physical blow could have. Mael. No, let me finish. She stepped closer, and there was steel in her voice now. You listen only when it's safe. You care only when it doesn't cost you anything. You talk about recognition and understanding and all these beautiful words, but the moment someone asks you to actually show up, you run. That's not fair, isn't it? She tilted her head, and for the first time since I'd met her, she looked every bit the child she was supposed to be. My brother is sitting alone in that observation deck right now, wondering if he was wrong about you, wondering if he imagined the connection he thought you shared. And you're down here buying a ticket to anywhere but here. I opened my mouth to argue, but she wasn't finished. My mother died believing that love was worth fighting for. That connection was worth the risk of loss. She made me promise to find someone who would understand, that someone who would honor what she tried to teach us. Mael's voice broke slightly. I thought that person was you. I'm not that person. Then who are you? The question hung in the air between us, simple and devastating. Who was I? A failed medic who'd run away from everything that mattered, a coward who'd rather live in isolation than risk being hurt again, a man so broken that even the possibility of healing terrified him. I'm someone who leaves, I whispered. Mael nodded slowly, like I'd just confirmed something she'd suspected all along. Then leave. But don't pretend it's for his sake. Don't pretend you're protecting him by abandoning him. You're protecting yourself, and we both know it. She turned to go, then paused at the entrance to the docking bay. For what it's worth, I think you're wrong. I think you're exactly the person my mother would have wanted us to find. But I also think you are too scared to find out if I'm right. And with that, she was gone, leaving me alone with the departure schedules and the weight of my own cowardice. 2,200 hours came and went. I sat in the docking bay staring at transport tickets I couldn't bring myself to buy, thinking about a broken alien sitting alone in an observation deck, watching stars, and wondering why the human he trusted with his heart had decided he wasn't worth the risk. For the first time in 3 years, I cried. Not for Rachel, not for the patience I'd lost, but for the man I could have been if I'd been brave enough to try. I sat in that docking bay until dawn, watching ships come and go, while I wrestled with the kind of choice that changes everything. By the time the station's artificial morning cycle kicked in, I'd made my decision. Not the smart one, not the safe one, but the only one I could live with. I went back to my quarters and opened the storage locker I hadn't touched in 3 years. Buried under old uniforms and equipment manuals was a small metal case, the kind they use for presenting military commendations. My hands shook as I lifted it out, and for a moment I almost put it back. Inside, nestled in faded velvet, was the Galactic Medical Corps Distinguished Service Medal, Silver Star blue ribbon, tiny engraved caduceus catching the light. The citation read, "For exceptional bravery and life-saving actions during the evacuation of Kepler Station, demonstrating the highest standards of medical practice under extreme combat conditions." They had given it to me for saving 17 lives during the bombing. What they didn't know was that I'd only been trying to save 18. Rachel's name wasn't on any citation. Her death wasn't mentioned in any report. She was just one more casualty I carried with me everywhere I went. I'd planned to throw the medal away a dozen times, but something always stopped me. Now I knew why. The observation deck on level 7 was empty when I arrived. For a moment, panic flared in my chest. What if he'd given up? What if he'd decided I wasn't worth waiting for? But then I noticed the small pile of data pads stacked neatly on the table beside the viewport, and I knew he'd been here recently. I settled into one of the chairs facing the stars and waited. Kyle appeared 20 minutes later, moving with that careful grace that made him seem smaller than his massive frame. He stopped when he saw me, surprise flickering across his features, followed quickly by something that might have been hope. "You came back," he whispered, his ruined voice barely audible. "I never actually left." I held up the transport ticket I'd been carrying all night. "Bought this, but couldn't bring myself to use it." He approached slowly, like I might bolt again if he moved too fast. When he reached for his data pad, I held up a hand. "Before you say anything, I need to give you something." I pulled the metal case from my jacket and set it on the table between us. The sight of it seemed to confuse him. He tilted his head clearly, waiting for an explanation. "This is from when I served in the medical corps during the war." I opened the case, revealing the medal inside. "They gave it to me for saving lives under enemy fire." Kale's eyes widened. He reached for his data pad, but I continued before he could type. "The thing is, they didn't give it to me for the lives I saved. They gave it to me for the one I lost." I picked up the medal, feeling its familiar weight. Her name was Rachel. She was my partner in every sense of the word. We were engaged, planning to get married after the war ended. Kale went very still, his dark eyes fixed on my face. "She was wounded during the bombing. Internal bleeding, multiple fractures, the kind of injuries that require immediate surgery. But we were trapped under rubble, no proper equipment, and I had 17 other critical patients." My voice caught. I had to choose. Save the many or save the one person who meant everything to me. I set the medal down on the table, my hands trembling. I chose the many. I let her die so I could save 17 strangers. And they gave me a medal for it. The silence stretched between us, heavy with the weight of confession. When Kyle finally reached for his data pad, his fingers moved slowly, deliberately. "Do you regret it?" The question I'd been asking myself for 3 years, every single day. "Would you choose differently now?" I thought about it, really thought about it, probably for the first time since it happened. No, I'd make the same choice, and I'd hate myself for it just as much. Kyle typed again. "Then why are you telling me this?" "Because you need to know what kind of person you're asking to matter to you." I picked up the medal again, holding it out to him. "I'm not the hero they think I am. I'm someone who let the woman he loved die because duty mattered more than love. He stared at the medal for a long moment, then looked back at me. When he typed his response, the words appeared slowly on his screen. Is that what you think love is? Always choosing the person over everything else? Isn't it? No. He erased the screen and started again. Love is trusting someone to make the hard choices even when they hurt. Love is knowing that the person you care about will always try to do what's right, even when what's right breaks their heart. I felt something crack open in my chest. She never got to tell me if she forgave me. She didn't need to. You forgave yourself by saving those 17 people. That's what love looks like when the person you love is a healer. He reached across the table and gently took the medal from my hands. For a moment, he just held it, studying the engraving with careful attention. This doesn't represent your failure, he typed with one hand while still holding the medal. It represents 17 families who got to keep someone they loved because you were brave enough to make an impossible choice. I don't deserve it. Neither do I deserve your mother's song, but we carry the things we're given, not the things we think we've earned. He stood up then, moving around the table until he was standing directly in front of me. The medal gleamed in his palm as he held it out. I can't give you forgiveness for something that doesn't need forgiving, but I can give you this. Instead of handing me back the medal, he did something unexpected. He placed his free hand over his heart, then slowly, deliberately moved it to cover mine. The touch was electric, not sexual, but something deeper, more profound. Like a circuit completing like two broken pieces, discovering they were parts of the same whole. In Tasauri culture, he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. This is called heart joining. It means allowing someone to stare inside your inner world, to see not just who you are, but who you could become. I felt tears on my cheeks, but I didn't pull away. What does it mean when a human does it? It means you're willing to try again, to risk being hurt for the chance of being healed. We stood there for what felt like hours, his hand over my heart, mine trembling under his touch. The medal lay forgotten on the table beside us. No longer a symbol of failure, but a bridge between two broken healers who'd finally found their way to each other. I don't know how to do this, I admitted. Neither do I. He smiled and it transformed his entire face. We'll figure it out together. And for the first time in 3 years, I believed that maybe, just maybe, I was worth the risk. 3 weeks later, I was standing in the doorway of a residential unit I'd never thought I'd call home, watching Kale attempt to cook something that smelled suspiciously like burned electronics. You know, I called out. When Maëlle said Tessauri cuisine was an acquired taste, I thought she meant the spices, not the smoke detector going off every 10 minutes. Kale turned from the stove, his face streaked with something that might have been sauce or possibly engine coolant. He held up his data pad with mock indignation. This is a traditional recipe. My grandmother made it for special occasions. What kind of special occasions declaring war? He laughed, that silent, shoulder-shaking laugh that I'd learned to love more than any sound I'd ever heard. The kitchen filled with the warmth of it, and I felt that familiar flutter in my chest that still caught me off guard sometimes. We'd moved into the residential quarters 2 weeks ago, a modest 3-room unit that somehow felt more like home than anywhere I'd lived in years. It wasn't exactly traditional by any species standards. Kael and I shared the larger bedroom, while Maëlle had claimed the smaller one and promptly covered every surface with what appeared to be a combination of advanced engineering schematics and children's drawings. Jace, Maëlle's voice echoed from the direction of her room. Come settle an argument. I found her sitting cross-legged on her bed, surrounded by data pads and what looked like half-assembled electronic components. Her latest project, apparently. She'd been building things constantly since we'd moved in together, little gadgets that served no obvious purpose but made her happy. What's the argument? Kael thinks I should ask permission before modifying the environmental controls. I think permission is for people who don't understand quantum thermodynamics. How old are you again? Old enough to know that this conversation is about to become very boring for everyone involved. She grinned, that impish expression that meant she was up to something. But that's not why I called you in here. She set aside the components and looked at me with those ancient eyes that never failed to remind me how much deeper she was than her years suggested. I've been thinking about family structures, she said carefully. Oh boy. In Tasari culture, when two people form a life bond, their families become interconnected. But we don't have words for relationships that cross species boundaries. I settled onto the edge of her bed, suddenly understanding where this was going. Maya, I've been doing research, she continued, as if I hadn't spoken. Human family structures are much more flexible than ours, more adoptive. What are you asking me? She was quiet for a moment, fiddling with one of her electronic widgets. When she finally looked up, there was vulnerability in her expression that I'd never seen before. In our language, there's a word, veltar. It means, she paused, searching for the right translation, half-father. Someone who becomes family not through blood, but through choice, through love. My throat went tight. Mael. I know it's presumptuous. I know we've only been living together for a few weeks, and I know you never asked to be responsible for a 12-year-old alien with boundary issues. The words came out in a rush, like she'd been rehearsing them. But you feel like family to me. You feel like the person my mother would have chosen for us if she'd had the chance. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. This little girl who'd orchestrated everything, who'd seen something in me that I'd never seen in myself, was asking me to be her father. Not biologically, not legally, but in all the ways that actually mattered. You don't have to answer now, she said quickly. You don't have to answer at all if you don't want to. I just wanted you to know that the option exists, that if you ever wanted to be my Veltar, I would be honored to be your daughter. I reached over and pulled her into a hug, feeling her small frame relax against me. I think I'd be the one who was honored. Is that a yes? That's a yes, kiddo. When we pulled apart, her eyes were bright with tears, but she was smiling. I have something for you, she said, reaching under her pillow. I made it myself. She handed me a small device about the size of a wrist communicator, but obviously handcrafted. The surface was smooth metal, etched with intricate patterns that seemed to shift in the light. What is it? A family marker. In Tasari culture, when someone becomes a Veltar, they receive one of these. It's programmed with our mother's song, the one you've been carrying for us. I turned the device over in my hands, studying the delicate craftsmanship. Mael, this is beautiful. Press the center. I did, and soft music filled the room. The same melody I'd heard 3 years ago in a dying woman's last breath, but fuller now. Richer, like it had been waiting all this time to be complete. She would have loved you, Mael said softly. She would have loved how you take care of us without making us feel like we need taking care of. Your brother takes care of me too. I know, she grinned. That's what makes it perfect. We sat there listening to the song, and I felt something settle into place that I hadn't even realized was missing. This was what family felt like. Not the desperate need to fix each other, but the simple desire to be better together than apart. Male, I said finally. Yes, Veltar. The words sent warmth through my chest. Thank you for seeing something in me that I couldn't see in myself. That's what family does, she said simply. We see each other clearly even when we can't see ourselves. From the kitchen came the sound of the smoke detector going off again, followed by Kael's muffled cursing in what I'd learned was very colorful Tasori. Should we go rescue dinner? I asked. Probably. But first, Mael stood up and moved to her window, gesturing for me to join her. Look. I followed her gaze and saw Kael through the kitchen window waving a dish towel at the smoke detector with one hand while typing frantically on his data pad with the other. His hair was disheveled, his clothes were stained, and he looked absolutely exasperated. But he was also smiling, actually genuinely smiling, with his whole face lit up like someone had turned on a light inside him. He hasn't smiled like that since before the war, Mael said quietly. I'd forgotten what he looked like when he was happy. I watched him through the window, this broken, beautiful man who'd somehow become my everything, and felt a rush of something I thought I'd lost forever. Hope. Not just for healing, but for a future that might actually be worth living. Come on, I said, putting my arm around Mael's shoulders. Let's go save your brother from his cooking before he burns down our home. Our home? She repeated, testing the words. I like the sound of that. So did I. More than I'd ever imagined possible. 6 months later, I woke up to the sound of Mael arguing with the food replicator. No, not protein paste, I said. Traditional grain cakes. Traditional. Do you not understand basic culinary programming? I found her in the kitchen, hands on her hips, glaring at a machine that had apparently decided to be difficult this morning. She'd grown in the past few months, not just physically, but in confidence. The scared little girl who'd first approached me in my workshop had been replaced by someone who argued with kitchen appliances and won. Having trouble? I asked, padding over to the coffee dispenser. This primitive piece of junk doesn't recognize Tasari festival foods. She kicked the replicator with her bare foot, which only made it beep indignantly. Today is Velmaran, the day families make wishes for the coming year. And that requires special grain cakes. It requires grain cakes that don't taste like recycled cardboard. I was about to suggest we just make them from scratch when Kal emerged from our bedroom carrying what looked like a sewing kit and wearing an expression of intense concentration. "Morning," I said, leaning up to kiss his cheek. It was still a small miracle that I could do that casual affection had become as natural as breathing. He smiled and held up my maintenance jacket, the one I wore for repair work around the station. There was a neat row of stitching along the sleeve in silver thread that definitely hadn't been there yesterday. "You fixed my jacket." He reached for his data pad, reinforced the stress points with traditional Tasari binding thread. "It's stronger than standard polymer weaving." "Kale, you didn't have to." Tasari mates maintain each other's tools and clothing. It's, he paused, searching for the right words. "It's how we show love through practical care." Mile looked up from her battle with the replicator. "It means he's claiming you officially. The silver thread is a family pattern. Anyone who sees it will know you belong to our house." I examined the stitching more closely. The pattern was intricate, beautiful, worked with the kind of precision that spoke of hours of careful effort. "When did you even have time to do this?" "Last night while you were sleeping." Kale's typing was shy, almost embarrassed. "I wanted to finish it before Velmaran. Because today is about family promises." Mael added, finally giving up on the replicator and pulling ingredients from storage instead. "Come here, Veltar. I'll teach you how to make proper grain cakes." The next hour was a masterclass in controlled chaos. Mael directed operations like a tiny general, teaching me how to measure grain flour by texture rather than weight, how to fold in the honey-like sweetener that Tasauri used for celebrations, how to shape the cakes so they cook evenly. Kale worked quietly beside us, adding his own touches to the process. A pinch of spice here, an adjustment to the cooking temperature there. His movements were economical, precise, like everything he did. "Your technique is improving," he typed during a lull in Mael's instructions. "I have good teachers. We have a good student." We finished the cakes just as the station's morning cycle reached full brightness. The three of us gathered around our small dining table, the grain cakes still warm from the cooking unit, cups of real coffee for me and Kyle sweet tea for Mael. "Now we make wishes," Mael announced, breaking off a piece of her cake. "But they have to be spoken aloud or they don't count." I looked at my strange little family, this collection of broken people who'd somehow become whole together, and felt that familiar tightness in my chest that I'd learned meant happiness. "I wish," I said carefully, "for more mornings like this one." Mael nodded approvingly. "I wish for Kale to remember how to laugh out loud again." We both turned to look at Kale, who was holding his piece of grain cake like it was something precious. He set down his data pad and spoke, his damaged voice rough but determined. "I wish for time. Enough time to deserve this happiness." The silence that followed was comfortable, full of understanding, rather than awkwardness. Outside our viewport, the stars wheeled slowly past, same as they had every day since I'd arrived on Stellan 9. But everything else had changed. "Mael," I said finally, "that first day when you asked if I was single, did you really think this would work?" She considered the question seriously, taking another bite of grain cake. "I thought you were both too stubborn to admit you needed each other. But I also thought that if I pushed hard enough, you might accidentally fall into being happy." Accidentally. Sometimes the best things happen when we're not trying so hard to control them. Kale reached over and took my hand, his fingers warm and calloused from years of careful work. No words, no grand gestures, just the simple comfort of touch. "You know what the strangest part is?" I said, looking between them. "I spent 3 years thinking I wasn't worth saving, and you two didn't save me at all." Mael tilted her head. "What do you mean? You just..." made room for me in your family, in your traditions, in your daily life. You didn't try to fix me or change me. You just included me until I remembered how to include myself. That's what love is, Kale typed with his free hand, making space for someone exactly as they are while trusting them to grow into who they could become. I thought about the question Mael had asked me all those months ago standing in my workshop with her two old eyes and her ridiculous proposal. Human, are you single? My brother thinks you'd be perfect. Perfect. I'd thought she was crazy then. How could someone as broken as me be perfect for anyone? But sitting here in our little kitchen, watching Mael steal bites of Kyle's grain cake while he pretended not to notice. Feeling the steady warmth of belonging settle into my bones, I finally understood what she'd meant. Not perfect in spite of my damage, but perfect because of it. Perfect because broken things really did fit together better than whole ones. You said I'd make a good mate, I said quietly, squeezing Kale's hand. I think I'm starting to believe it. Mael grinned, that satisfied expression of someone who'd been proven right about something important. I told you so. And outside our viewport, the stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the small miracle of three people learning how to be a family in the vast emptiness of space. Some endings, I realized, were really just beginnings in disguise. And that's how a broken human medic learned that sometimes the best families are the ones we choose, not the ones we're born into. If you enjoyed this story about finding love and healing across the stars, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We've got more incredible HFY tales coming your way, featuring humans proving that our greatest strength isn't our technology or our weapons. It's our ability to connect, to heal, and to make space for others in our hearts. What did you think of Jace, Kale, and Mael's journey? Drop a comment below and let me know which moment hit you the hardest. Until next time, remember, in a universe full of aliens and advanced civilizations, humanity's superpower has always been love. See you in the next story.